Heat waves, lightning, meteor showers, the northern lights, even some flooding. I have a lot to get through in this deep dive, and so let's get to it. Hello, welcome. I'm Alex Burkill, presenter and meteorologist here at the Met Office, and as always, this deep dive is coming to you exclusively on YouTube. And as always, if you like anything that I talk about, do hit the like button. If you have any questions, why not leave a comment? And if you want to share it with someone that you think might be interested in anything that I've been through today. But let's get to it. Like I said, a lot to get through. Last night, were you lucky enough to see the northern lights? There was a great display across much of the country. There were sightings even as far south as Devon and Cornwall, which is relatively rare. The reason for the northern lights being so dramatic last night, well, there was up to 4 coronal mass ejections which headed towards the Earth, and that led to a strong or severe geomagnetic storm, which actually started to pick up during the daytime yesterday, but we still saw the effects of it as we went into the overnight period, which is why many places were lucky enough to see images such as these behind me. This wonderful picture from Rodri Viney in Abereron. Then there's another stunning picture from @MetJam on Twitter, on X. And with this as well, not only the northern lights, but you're seeing the Perseid meteor shower, which was also in display last night. It peaked around Sunday, Monday night, and it's a really dramatic meteor shower. You get around 50 to 100 meteors an hour, and it's caused by the Earth traveling through the debris of Comet Swift-Tuttle, and this is what gives this dramatic, the shooting star effect as we see the meteor shower occurring. As well as these images, I had many sent to me on Twitter or X, so please remember my handle is @WeatherAlex. If you do ever want to share any weather images, do reach out to me there. This lovely image again showed the northern lights and the Perseid meteor shower from Met Forecast UK. Lovely display of the northern lights from UK Weather Chase as well. And then this one from Warwickshire from Jack March as well. Just shows that lots of places across the UK were lucky enough to see the northern lights last night. And so I know the question, are we going to see it again tonight? And there are a few things at play to answer this. Firstly, I mentioned the fact that we had that geomagnetic storm that started during the daytime yesterday. It is now easing. We've seen it at its strongest already. So with that, the signal becomes weaker. And so it's not out of the question, especially the further north you are, so northern parts of Scotland, a reasonable chance that we could see a bit more of the northern lights as we go through this evening and overnight into Wednesday. But we need to look at cloud cover. Last night, the clouds were pretty clear, and so we had lots of clear skies around, and that led to the fact that many places had a reasonable chance of seeing it. However, tonight there's a bit more cloud around. We have a front that's making its way southeastwards across the UK, and with that front there's rain, there's also quite a bit of cloud. So the chance of us seeing it a little bit less, and the chance of you seeing the Perseid meteor shower also a bit less because of the cloud as well. That being said, as that front clears away towards the southeast, there will be some clear skies developing, and it's across Scotland, maybe Northern Ireland, that we're going to see those clearer skies, particularly during the second half of the night. And like I said, it's across Scotland where we have the greatest chance, especially towards the north of Scotland, of seeing the northern lights again. And so there's a reasonable chance. It's definitely not out of the question. But I think most places less likely to see it than last night because the signal's significantly weaker and there is quite a bit more cloud around as well. But if you do see any images, why not send them to us of either the northern lights or the Perseid meteor shower? Did you see them last night? Let me know in the comments. The other thing that happened yesterday, which most of you will no doubt be aware, it was the hottest day of the year so far. We had temperatures reaching 34.8 Celsius. The highest temperature was recorded in Cambridge. Now, obviously, this is a provisional figure at the moment. Our verification team will verify the data to make sure that the site's safe and secure, the site is up to scratch and that it is a reliable data source. But we're going with 34.8 being the highest temperature recorded yesterday, and therefore, yes, the hottest day of the year so far. But the thing that we've looked into and I wanted to draw your attention to is the fact that days as hot as yesterday are becoming more frequent. If we look back over the decades, and in the 1970s, we only reached 34.8 or higher in one summer, and that was in 1976. In the 80s, we never reached it. In the 1990s, we only had 2 summers getting that high, getting that hot. Again, in the noughties, only 2 summers. By 2010s, we had the 3 summers or 3 years with temperatures reaching 34.8 or getting higher. But in the 2020s, we have already had 3 instances, and obviously we're only just about halfway through the 2020s. And so we're seeing a real trend that the hotter spells are becoming more common, are becoming more frequent. With that hot weather, now I am aware that the hot weather wasn't across the whole of the UK. It was very hot towards the southeast, less so across Scotland. Across Scotland, you had something a bit different. Yesterday, there was a lot of thunder and lightning around. So if I show you that now instead, and I don't think my lightning is actually working today. It wasn't when I tested it, but you never know, it might have started working. And if I zoom into the UK, and we had this feature that pushed its way across parts of Northern Ireland and more so across parts of Scotland as we went through yesterday. If I just try and pause it, I missed. But if we try and pause it, and you can really see the intense rain, and with that, there was a lot of lightning around yesterday. There were around 16,000 lightning strikes recorded across the UK yesterday, and about 14,000 of them came across Scotland. So it was really frequent lightning, and that did lead to some issues. We did have a warning out, and that's because thunderstorms like these do cause some problems. There are reports of a building being struck by lightning and catching fire, and that's the kind of thing that we're warning about when we issue our thunderstorm warnings, because of the frequent lightning, the intense rain, the large hail, the gusty winds. All of these can cause some problems, and we did see some problems as a result of this system that came through yesterday. Now, with the reason that we had so much thundery weather was because of the hot air, and so that led to those high temperatures that we saw across parts of the southeast in particular. And whilst we're on that topic, I wanted to share with you a study that's been carried out with our urban forecasting team here at the Met Office, supported by the University of Reading, and it's been looking at machine learning and how we can use machine learning to better forecast heat waves in urban areas. And the way they've done this is by using machine learning and looking back at heat waves across London in 2019 and 2021 and fed that information into the machine, and then come up with a forecast using a finer resolution. Now, when I talk about resolution, I'll use this image behind me to try and explain what I mean. On the left-hand side, I have our current standard Met Office forecast resolution, and with that model, we split the Earth up into 1.5 by 1.5 kilometre grid squares, and then within that grid square we calculate what the weather is going to do. I say we, the supercomputer calculates what the weather is going to do in terms of temperature, in terms of rain and cloud, all those different variables. Now, the larger the grid square, the less detail we have, because you're calculating what's happening within this grid square and you get one value per grid square. If you make the resolution finer, like they have done in this study that they've been doing for this urban heat wave, then you're able to be a bit more accurate with exactly what we can expect in terms of temperatures in individual areas. And now this study split the grid up into 100 by 100 meter squares, so a much finer resolution than the one that we currently use with the Met Office. Now, a few things to bear in mind. This is just a study. It's not something that we're able to implement operationally just yet, because it took a lot of work. And this was just looking at London, and it used machine learning, which is something that we're trying to use more and more of here at the Met Office. But it made huge developments, and it discovered that the forecast for an event that's already happened, but they then used the data from those previous heat waves that they'd fed into the machine to forecast what would happen, and they came up with the temperature error was around 11% improved using this data with the machine learning forecast resolution. And so it really did make quite an improvement in terms of the forecasting. One way that you could think about it when you look at the grid squares is you're going from not really being able to pinpoint the temperature individually in a an area within 1.5 kilometers, going down to, you could come up with different temperatures within just a street, because by this point you're looking at just 100 meters difference between places, and so the accuracy in our forecast really can improve. So interesting study. If you want to know more about this, then do head to our website. It's on our homepage with more information about what was carried out and the findings from it. But let's go further ahead. I already started looking about what we can expect through the next few days. And let's start off by showing you the jet stream, because as you can see, actually, let's come back to the jet stream later. Let's start off by looking at our rain. And I mentioned that we have a front going through overnight tonight into Wednesday. And if I zoom in a bit more, across parts of the southeast, that rain's probably not going to be too much. It will probably break up, but as we go into the afternoon tomorrow, across parts of the southeast, we could see some heavy showers developing, and so do watch out for those. Elsewhere, once that front clears through during the early hours, it's actually looking like a pretty decent day. But now I'll put the jet stream back on, because as we go through later Wednesday and into Thursday, the jet stream is going to be piling into the UK, particularly across northwestern parts of the UK, and this is then going to be driving some very wet weather across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, even into northwest England. Cumbria could have quite a high amount of rain as we go through Thursday. So a pretty wet picture across the northwest of the UK on Thursday, a little bit dry, or quite a bit drier towards the southeast. But that front will gradually then make its way southeastwards as we go through later Thursday and into Friday. And with that, then it clears away towards the southeast. It may take a little bit of time to clear away from the southeast on Friday, so do be aware across southeastern parts could be a bit wet for a time, but it should clear away eventually into the afternoon. Before then, more wet weather comes in from the northwest. That feature doesn't look as heavy as the one that's coming through on Thursday. And then that comes through, and then thereafter, actually, as we go into the weekend, yes, there may be a bit of rain around, but really for much of Saturday and also Sunday, a lot of dry weather to be had. It's actually looking fairly decent, not as hot as it was previously. Temperatures are just around average for the time of year, but at this time of year, if you get any decent sunshine, that's still pretty warm. However, it may not last. The largely settled picture for this weekend probably won't last particularly long. There's another system waiting to come in from the west. If I just scroll this to the end, you see that's coming towards the UK, and we are going to see some wet weather arriving as we go through next week. And that's kind of the theme that we're going to take through much of next week as well. It really does look like we're going to have a mobile westerly pattern, so various features coming in from the west, bringing some wet and windy weather at times, and it's kind of what we've seen a fair amount of so far this summer, and that's what we're going to see through much of next week. A few things to bear in mind with that pattern: the heaviest rain, the strongest winds will be generally towards northwestern parts, but there will be some rain pushing through as well. So in the southeast it's likely to be drier, but not totally dry. That being said, there will be some fine weather around in between any systems that come in from the west. It's just generally going to be that mobile westerly pattern with various features coming through. So not always raining, but there will be some rain for most of us, especially towards northwestern parts. The other thing that I wanted to show you, and if I just start back to the here and now, when it comes to next week's weather, it's actually quite important to look at what's happening across the other side of the Atlantic. I'm going to zoom out because it was taking me a bit long to get there, and there is currently Tropical Storm Ernesto, which is affecting eastern parts of the Caribbean, the Leeward Islands in particular, and it is forecast to become a hurricane as it makes its way northwards. It clears away from the Caribbean, but then is likely to head towards Bermuda, and this could be quite a feature, and it could intensify, it could become a major hurricane, and that could cause some problems for Bermuda. A similar storm was Hurricane Fabian back in 2003, which did cause a lot of damage to Bermuda, and so they do need to be aware that there is some intense weather heading their way. There is some uncertainty, and this plays a part in what we can expect in the UK. But let's look at that now. Here is the current forecast track from NHC showing the feature, and you can see it's a tropical storm but likely to become a hurricane as we go through Thursday before heading further north towards Bermuda, still in hurricane status as you would expect as it travels over the warm seas. And as it then hits Bermuda as a could be a major hurricane, likely to cause some problems. But what happens thereafter? And that's when things get a little bit more interesting, perhaps from the UK's point of view. And we can look at that in a couple of ways. So this is ECMWF data. On the left hand side I have have various forecast tracks, and you can see they all take it westwards across the parts of the Caribbean, then northwards up towards Bermuda, and then most of them spin it then a bit eastwards, and it's likely that we're going to see it won't be a hurricane by this point. It will have weakened, but it's likely to interact with the mid-latitude flow and then come eastwards towards the UK as we go through next week. Now, there is a fair amount of spread in exactly the track that it's going to take, and if on the right-hand side, if you look at the probability, yes, I mean, quite likely that the low that was ex-Ernesto would come towards the UK, but it will be heavily modified, as always happens, as you get across as it goes across the Atlantic Ocean. With that then, what does that mean for the UK? Well, because there's so much uncertainty as exactly what it's going to do, as always happens when it comes to hurricanes and how they progress, how they then move across the Atlantic, there's a lot of uncertainty as to how it's going to impact the UK's weather. But this is one possible outcome for next Friday, again from ECMWF, and it shows a pretty deep area of low pressure because of what was Ernesto coming across the Atlantic, a deep area of low pressure heading close to the UK. And if this came off, we'd have some very strong winds, some very wet weather across parts of the UK. But it's worth throwing in the caveat that another model run had a very different picture from the UK's point of view. It takes that low, not as deep, and a bit further north, and as a result allows for high pressure to push in from the south. And so if this came off, we'd have a very different Friday, and it would actually be largely dry and a fine picture. And so whilst I'm fairly confident that the general trend through next week will be that westerly pattern, various systems coming in from the west, exactly how the feature that is currently Tropical Storm Ernesto will become a hurricane, then weaken, is going to interact with the UK, that's still all to play for. It could bring something unsettled, it could bring something a bit drier and a bit warmer, or it could bring pretty much everything in between. So I think that's everything that I wanted to cover about Ernesto, but before I go, there are a couple of other things I did want to mention. This Friday is the 20th anniversary of the severe flooding event that happened at Boscastle in Cornwall. I don't know if you remember it, but I do. It was a real severe event, and it was caused by an area of low pressure just to the southwest of the UK. Now, this area of low pressure then led to some heavy rain, some showers aligning parallel to the North Cornwall coast, and then they sort of stalled, and so you ended up with these showers just sticking around over the hills just to the east of Boscastle. And so we saw a lot of rain falling in just this relatively small area. We had around 200 millimeters of rain in just a few hours, which is more than twice the month's worth of rain that you'd normally expect through August for this area. And as a result of that intense rain from those showers just stalling and sticking around, we then saw around 2 billion litres of water going into the rivers that lead towards Boscastle, and then we had that heavy, intense flow of rainwater coming towards Boscastle, and it led to such damage and such destruction. Buildings were damaged, livelihoods ruined, and homes destroyed as well in places. Here you can see the rescue rescue effort, that's the word, going on with the helicopter trying to help people and rescue people that were trapped on top of and in their buildings. Cars were just pushed to death in the fast-flowing water, down and destroyed, and here's more damage of those same cars, all caused by this intense rainfall that started over the hills, and then that water came down to the valley that then led towards Boscastle. And this image really just shows how much damage and destruction was caused in just such a short period of time. It really was very problematic. But the question then is, could this still happen today? And to some extent, in as much as the weather event could definitely happen again if we had exactly the same setup, but we would be much better at forecasting it and letting people know that it's going to happen for a number of reasons. In the middle here, I have the actual radar from that day on the 16th of August, and you can see that intense line of showers that just lingered parallel, like I said, to the North Cornwall coast and just continued to give some really heavy rain to those hills near Boscastle, which is why we saw those rainfall totals building up. Then on the left-hand side, I have the model data that we had available to us at the time, 20 years ago. And you can see those grid squares that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the urban heat paper study that we've been doing. And you can see those grid squares, they were 12 by 12 kilometers, so quite big, really big in comparison to the 1.5 by 1.5 we have currently. And as a result, those grid squares, they were able to point out that there were going to be some showers around, but it didn't capture just how intense they were and where those intense showers were most likely, because it spread the intensity of the rain over relatively large grid squares, and that's why it didn't capture just how impactful this event was going to be. But if we compare it to the same output that we would get in that same event if we used our current 1.5 by 1.5 kilometer forecast, then you can really see it much better captures that intense thunder or intense rain that we saw in association with those showers that just lined up and really brought that devastating heavy rain, heavy flooding across parts of Boscastle, as well as the improvements in our forecast accuracy because of improvements in our supercomputer, our model capability. We've also become better at warning people. So we have our warning system, we work with the Environment Agency, with our flood forecasting centre to better understand how places are going to be impacted by wet weather, by the rain, and where we're most likely to see the flooding. So this event could happen again, but if it did, we would be in a much better position to see it coming and let people know that this is going to occur. Now, the last thing that I did want to leave you with before I go, something globally, and if I put the temperatures on, I just wanted to highlight, actually I'll start off back at home. And I just wanted to highlight that over parts of Greece at the moment, we have had some very hot weather and we've had really hot, dry weather through much of this summer, really. And it's this that has contributed to the severe wildfires that have been happening around the outskirts of Athens and, of course, lots of problems. So lots of devastation in association with the wildfires there. That's everything that I wanted to talk about. I think I've talked for long enough. Do join us again next time. Alex Deacon will be here tomorrow with the 10-day trend. I'll be updating the 14-day outlook, which appears in the long-range section of our app. So if you're interested in what happens as we go through next week and beyond, then do check that out. Otherwise, have a lovely rest of your day. And as always, I will be replying to some of the comments this afternoon. So if you do have any questions, do check me out there. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.